All right, so now that we have a good idea of nutrition and how we can actually figure out the nutrients that are going into our bodies, let's talk more specifically about exactly how that food is processed in the body. Take some time now to download the digestive system diagram that's available on Canvas and label the figure in the worksheet. And remember, be sure to study this because you're going to have to label certain structures on next week's quiz. Similarly, use this slide to fill in the functions of the labeled structures in the worksheet. This may become very important in the quiz when you're doing your matching exercises. Now, where does the entire process of digestion begin? It begins in the mouth. The mouth performs both physical and chemical digestion. So in terms of physical digestion, actually chewing up the food that we put into our mouths into smaller pieces, and chemical digestion. One example of chemical digestion that's going on in the mouth is that our salivary glands release saliva, which contains the enzyme amylase. So remember that ASE ending to the name of the particular protein indicates that it's an enzyme, and amylase specifically is designed to break down starches into simpler sugars that we could further break down and use for energy. Now, because food only spends a very short time in the mouth, there is a lot of the food that still remains undigested, and we're going to learn what happens to that in the coming slides. After the mouth, the esophagus connects the mouth to the stomach. Food is transported down the esophagus through wave-like contractions of muscles in the esophagus that's known as peristalsis. On the way, the food passes what's called the epiglottis. You can see it labeled towards the top of our figure here. The epiglottis functions sort of like a trap door that prevents food from going into the lungs. Now, if you've ever eaten something and then immediately had to cough, this may have happened to you, where the food goes down what people call the wrong pipe. And so the epiglottis is designed to prevent food from going down into your airway. Now, you might be wondering if any digestion actually happens in the esophagus, and the answer is largely no. It is simply transporting food from the mouth to the stomach where further digestion can occur. Food will reach the stomach through the esophagus, where it is mixed with acid and enzymes designed to break down food. Once again, as we saw in the mouth, there's a combination of physical digestion, where we see churning and mixing of food, producing a mixture called chyme. And you can also see what are called rugae, which are a series of ridges which allow the stomach to expand when you have a very large meal. Now, there is also chemical digestion taking place, where the presence of food triggers the release of certain gastric juices that are important in the breakdown of that food. This mainly contains things like hydrochloric acid, mucus, and pepsin. These components are involved in breaking down the food in your stomach. Specifically, pepsin is an enzyme that breaks down particular types of proteins. After leaving the stomach, the food goes into the small intestines. Now, this is a long, narrow, coiled tube extending from the stomach to the large intestine. By the time your food reaches the end of the small intestine, all digestion is completed. So it's the primary organ where digestion takes place. And nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream. You might be surprised to know that the small intestine is about 6 to 7 meters long when it's laid end to end. The small intestines are organized into 3 sections. The duodenum, which you can see at the top of our figure here, very important in the chemical digestion of chyme in preparation for absorption in the other sections of the small intestines. And the next 2 sections, the jejunum and the ileum, which you can see labeled here, have the primary job of absorbing nutrients from digested food into the bloodstream. There are several other organs within our digestive system that produce digestive juices that help the stomach and small intestine perform their jobs. These include organs such as the liver and gallbladder. Now, the liver produces a very important enzyme called bile, a substance that breaks fats into smaller droplets. Now, bile is then stored in the gallbladder. Important enzymes also come from the pancreas, which produces a number of enzymes to break down carbs, fats, and proteins. And so you'll notice that a number of different organs actually contribute to helping us digest the foods that we eat. So what happens next with our food? By the time food reaches the end of the small intestines, digestion is pretty much done. All the nutrients that are needed are absorbed through the walls of the small intestine through millions of little finger-like projections that are called villi. These villi are specifically designed to absorb passing nutrients into our bloodstream. Once the nutrients are in the bloodstream, it is then the job of the circulatory system, which we'll talk about on Wednesday, to take the nutrients wherever they are needed in the body. And so remember back to our very first lecture where we were talking about this idea of interdependence in biology. And so all of our organ systems work together. And so you'll see that, when we digest food, for example, our digestive system kicks into action, but then our circulatory system is largely responsible for transporting those broken down nutrients to all the areas of our body. And if you want a greater idea of what the villi do and how those nutrients actually get into our bloodstream, you can watch the short video at the bottom of your screen. Once all nutrients are absorbed in the small intestines, the material left passes to the large intestine, where the main function of the large intestine is to absorb water. The material left after this particular process is known as feces, and the feces enter the rectum and exit through the anus. And that is the end of the digestive process and how the digestive system processes the food that we eat. Now, I want to thank you very much for listening to Lecture 3. And just a few quick reminders for Wednesday. Remember that you need to finish up discussion number 2 related to gene editing. This is available on Canvas in the discussion section. Be ready to turn in the got lactase activity, which we worked on last Wednesday at the beginning of class. Prepare for the quiz on this material in the previous videos that I posted related to nutrition and digestion, and also using the flashcards available on Canvas. And also, in preparation for our activity on Wednesday, I want you to watch the video to introduce you to concepts in the circulatory system, and we'll be doing an activity related to this information. And so thanks for listening, and I'll see you Wednesday.